Okay, calling to order the Transportation Advisory Board meeting for October 21st. We can do a roll call.
Board Member Wicklund.
Here.
Chair Lehner.
Here.
Board Member Kalkofer.
Here.
Okay, since we don't have a quorum, I guess we will contain this to information items since we can't vote on anything. We can't even approve the minutes, so I guess we'll move to communications from staff.
Yeah, thank you. Phil Greenwald, Transportation Planning Manager with the City of Longmont. Just wanted to update you on some things. First of all, I wanted to introduce our new transportation planner, Kaylee Fallon. I'm going to have her come up and just kind of introduce herself for a few moments and tell us her background a little bit. And I think that's about it. Thanks.
Hi, good evening. My name is Kaylee Fallon. Like Phil said, I'm the new transportation planner here at the city. Prior to coming over to the city, I was the emerging mobility and transportation demand management planner for DRCOG. I was there for about 4 years. And prior to that, I was getting my master's degree in sustainable planning management. So happy to be here and put names to faces. So thanks, Phil.
Thank you. And we all only last at DRCOG for 4 years. That's kind of the rule of thumb. That's in the record now. So Vision Zero Task Force, I'm going to have Cami now come up and talk a little bit about Vision Zero Task Force. You have some items at your desk tonight to help you prep on some of these items that are coming up. Also, World Remembrance Day for victims of traffic crashes. So thanks, Cami, for helping us.
Yes. Hello, board members. You should have the hard copy. You got the electronic copy sent to you at about 5:15 this evening, and I think it'll be follow up in the post-meeting minutes. So if you have an opportunity to share about either option, our task force is kicking off next Monday night. And I just want to clarify what we're going to try to do is for boards that are pre-existing, such as this one and other local advisory groups, you don't have to feel like you don't need to bring a member to the task force. This is more for individuals and members of the public who would have no other way to interact. You're more than welcome to come as board members, but if you come and want to just represent yourself instead of the board member, we'll bring, obviously, Vision Zero to you officially to the board. And then World Day of Remembrance, you may have heard about this. It's an international event that happens worldwide to recognize those that we have lost to roadway violence. So being now that we are a Vision Zero community, we wanted to make sure in our first year that we pulled off an event. So it's going to be on Sunday, November 3rd. We promise it does not interact with the Broncos game. We made sure to schedule around that, but it will still be light enough that people and families can come and hopefully enjoy some snacks and foods. We'll have some guest presenters. We'll kind of talk about what the current state and condition is in Longmont and where we plan to go. We'll have a call to action. It's going to be centered around safer speeds in Longmont. So a lot of the same information you've been hearing in other places, but it's going to create a space for those families and friends and loved ones to come and commemorate the people they've lost and or recognize the survivors that are in our community. So just creating space for this kind of opportunity. We're excited for next year. We've already been talking about partnerships to connect it to Dia de los Muertos, being that the communities and culturally appropriate are already honoring those they have lost. So I think we're excited for what this could become in the future as well. So you, of course, are all invited to both. But just know for the formal task force, any conversations or any planning or feedback, we will bring that to you. So don't feel obligated to have to come to this version. We will keep you in the loop. But thank you.
Any questions for Cami before she goes? Great. Another update from staff is that we have the microtransit going fast and furious as far as trying to get it planned and implemented. The plan right now is to have it implemented in early December of this year. That's due to a number of reasons, but really it's because we had to restructure the contract to make sure that we could get the new mobility hub at I-25 and 119, which is outside of the RTD district, into our microtransit model, even though it's funded by RTD. So I don't know if the pieces are coming together, but the idea that RTD funded this made it so that they didn't want to fund anything that was beyond their boundaries. So we have taken on that role of separating the contract into two different pieces here, so we could do the RTD version and then the extension through the city only version. So we are going to be doing that again in early December. You'll see all the different advertising and marketing campaigns for that coming out probably within the next month here as we start to gear up for that. But we're very excited for that. And then last thing on our list was TAB in November. We're just wanting to let you know that we think we'll be fine not doing the TAB on November 11th, which is our Veterans Day, and a day off or holiday for the city. So we think we can get all the things, especially if we can get the crash report done today, we can get all the things in December that we need to do. And we can talk about that at the end of the meeting. But what's on the list for that? That's all we have right now from public or from staff. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Phil. Okay. Any public invited to be heard? Does not look as we do. Oh, bring up the crash report. And then I guess we'll move to the action items, the crash report.
Thank you, Chair Lehner. Board members, Jim Angstadt, Director of Engineering Services. This evening, we are here to present the City of Longmont 2024 Annual Roadway Crash Report. It is in draft format. We have it was provided to you, I believe, Friday with another draft version. And we just want to provide a brief presentation to go over some of the highlights for that. And then we can dive into it, answer any questions, or see where you want to take that. There we go. Report structure. It's divided into a number of sections, and then appendix. It's got an intro, crash information, and then our sections that we have been collecting data on and involve yearly trends, individual injuries, time trends, the fatal crash comparison with other cities, and highest crash locations, fatal crash details. And then our appendix is basically the intersections and the street segments, and basically just a listing of the kind of the number of crashes alphabetically. Some of the highlights. Just want to go over real quick. Yearly trends. In 2023, the population obviously continues to increase. There were 2,051 total crashes. When you look back into previous crash reports to look at previous years, those numbers will be different for the total crashes. We have now started to include, we've gone back and we've included the state roads. Namely 66, which had not been included in previous reports, so we now are including those. So the trend, we're still seeing a trend up for total crashes. Not a huge increase, but it is trending up. Although it is lower than pre-COVID numbers. In 2019, pre-COVID, before kind of people got off the roads in 2020, and we saw our crash history drop. 2019 had like over 2,300 crashes, so we're still lower than pre-COVID numbers. Which, when you look at data, you can look at it a dozen different ways to comparison, and sometimes I'll look at it in a favorable light, and I think we're well, certainly 2,000 crashes seems to be a lot. We're covering 356 miles, 100,000 people, and miles and hundreds, millions of trips a day on our, millions of trips a year on our roads.
Do we calculate the MT?
Yes, we have a estimate based on our arterials, but we're trying to integrate more of our daily trips intercity as well to our VMTs. But we do have a VMT number for presentations.
Did we use the VMT numbers as a proportion against the crash report, so we know that COVID VMT was extremely low, as we know, what the VMT numbers were prior to COVID as what they are now.
We didn't dig that deep into some of the data. So we also have started looking at fatal and serious injury crashes, 68 in 2023. That is trending down. In 2021, there was 80. In 2022, 72. So, the trend is going down. And still, that is also much lower than some of the pre-COVID numbers we saw in 2019 with 111. We also have a section on individual injuries. I wanted to distinguish this is different than total crashes. This is provides us data for the overall fatalities and injuries for the period of the study versus the number of crashes. So in some crashes may have 2 fatalities or 2 or 3 serious injuries. So we started summing those numbers up. The age group, 25 to 29 is the highest. 413 fatalities and injuries overall. And then you can see the breakdown of pedestrians, bikes, motor vehicles, and then motorcyclists. We have a section on time trends as well. October still remains the highest number of all crashes. Not sure why. The data's not going to tell us that. We'd have to dig a little deeper into investigating some of the reports, but could be that times it's starting to get dark earlier. It's after school starts. We start to see maybe more activities in the fall. So it is still October. We can't figure it out. Crashes and minor injuries. The highest month is July with around 143 on the average. All crashes for day of the week is Friday, about 1,500. And then FSI crashes and minor injuries for day of the week. Thursday is the highest, although I've thrown in Wednesday and Tuesday as well. Midweek seems to have relatively high numbers. And then overall time of the day. The report has the 5-year trends. I only noted time of day for 2023. In this presentation is 5 to 6. People get out of work seems to be when we might see the most cars on the road. This slide is a little difficult to get to, so I'd ask if you look at the report itself. We've had this a number of years. It's a comparison with other cities. 5-year average is still around 7.6. When you base it on 100,000 population, we threw that in as a column. We're at about 7.7 accidents, or fatalities per year. The ranking seems to be about the same. We may have moved up a little bit higher. What I do want to note that in our history in Longmont, fatal crashes in 2023 dropped by half. Previous years were 8. Last year we had 4. To date this year in Longmont in 2024, we've had 4 fatals. One of which was in the last 2 weeks. But if that trend continues, if you look at earlier in the report, we had a high year of 12 fatals. That'll drop off in the future report, and we'll probably see a pretty good change. Digging into a little more into some of the meat of the report, we also have some tables with the high crash locations. We have listed the top 25 intersections by total crashes. Not a big surprise that Highway 119 and Main Street tops the list, as it has for a number of years. Little bit of a surprise that 17th and Main is the second highest, although that 117 is down from previous years at that intersection. More than likely, we've done, CDOT came in a few years ago, did some access management, put some medians on Main, probably reducing some of the cross traffic, and has helped, but it's still a high intersection. We've broken out the intersections with 5 or more fatal and serious injuries. 9th and Main is of concern with 10. And then we also listed the intersections with at least one fatal serious crash. 21st and Hover has 4, and then there's others listed. We've also included top 25 segments of roadways by total crashes. So we're seeing a lot in Highway 19 between South Pratt Parkway to Main Street. Segments with 5 or more FSI crashes. Hover Nelson to Boston is a little bit on the high side. And then we had 1 fatal there in the last 5 years. So there are it's a higher speed as it gets off of Nelson. A lot of cross traffic going into Home Depot. That could change in the future because we're going to be making that driveway a right in, right out. There's also a signal going in just north of Home Depot at the new Fairgrounds Marketplace, the extension of Mountain Brook. And then the last one is segments with at least 1 FSI crash, which is Highway 66, and it has basically 4 in that area. Some things to note about this. One of the items we look at with our crash reports is where we need to focus on work. So on at least 2 of these intersections that are listed here, there are future projects being worked on. 21st and Main they're looking at it as part of the Main Street Corridor project. And we've been working with public safety on the segment on 119 to put in some access management. CDOT's said, go ahead, let's show us what you got. And so we're working on getting consultants to start laying that out. And then we're closing out with kind of the final items. We have a section on fatal crash details, which we've been before, has some more detail on some of the fatals. It's taken directly from the crash reports that we get from the state that are on the set form. And then the appendix, which has all of our intersection crashes. We've listed them this year alphabetically, so it's a little bit easier to read than just starting at the highest number of crashes and working your way down. In doing some analysis on this last week, it's a lot easier to read than if you know what kind of the intersection first, then you can see the numbers. So I closed out this presentation with just some information on reporting traffic issues. As you could report on almost anything in the city, service works in the email are online, or call the Public Works Service Works or Police Non-Emergency, and as always, if it's an emergency, 911. And with that, just a couple of notes, comments on the traffic report. We utilize this report as one of our tools to help us identify where we should be utilizing some of our limited resources. It can be utilized as a measure of success in comparing it to previous reports of work we have done. And I'll cite a couple of examples in that. In 2018 at Clover Basin and Airport, we had some incidents with some school kids getting hit. We made some changes to the signal, namely that we made it on the left turns, we made it a protected versus permissive. I always confuse those. And so in this report, last year's report showed 28 accidents, crashes. This year we're down to 21. So it takes time to see the results of that, but we do see that. Another example would be Highway 66 in Maine. Similar situation in the north and southbound direction. We put in permissive, took out the protective. In 23's report, there were 125 crashes there, reduced in this report to 110. Still high, but we see some improvement. The biggest change we probably saw was south of 119 on Main Street at Grand Avenue. CDOT came in and we worked with them. They identified a number of crashes in that area, put in the concrete median, made Grand Avenue right in, right out on both sides of the road. In 2023, there was 45 crashes total over a 5-year period, and now in 24, on that 5-year report, we're down to 23. The opposite's true also. We have some increases in some intersections, so that would lend us to what we can focus on in the coming years. I'll point out 9th and Main, we were down at 85 in 23's report. This year we're up to 97. So there's some concern there that when we see those swings or changes, we're gonna pay some attention to some of those areas. And some of those, some of what we do can be quick fixes. It can be additional signing. At signalized intersections, it could be eliminating right turn on reds. It's adding more signing. Could be some striping changes. On Main Street, we've had median enhancements that has appeared to help. So to help with access management. And then, futures looking at larger scale CIP projects as well. One of the projects Kyle's trying to line up is at 17th and Airport. We've had some issues there. So we're looking at traffic signal roundabout. We chased a grant earlier this year. We were not successful, but we'll continue with that. And so with that, I'll open it up to any questions and turn it over to Phil.
So I just wanted to add one last thing, or maybe we should have added it at the very beginning, is so you're going to see lots of numbers today, and you have, but we recognize as a staff that, and I think you do too, that each one of these numbers is a human that's out there, one of our citizens or somebody who's part of the fabric of our society and being impacted. So we don't want to go past and say that, obviously we have to analyze the data, and this is how we do it with numbers, but we do recognize that each one of these people has been affected, especially when you talk about serious injuries and fatalities. That's their families and it's a broader sense of the community that's been impacted by that. And unfortunately, a lot of us know people who have been affected by these. I can say that I think one of your TAB members for sure has been impacted by this. So it's not just numbers on a page, but it does represent something bigger. So we just want to recognize that, and just hope you understand that we also have to look at the data and how we approach these things as we move forward, especially with Vision Zero. Thanks.
Taylor, I'll start with you. If you want to ask some questions, I'm sure you do. Yes?
I'm going to wait a moment.
Okay.
Phil, thanks for saying that. That's really important for us to humanize the data, but also knowing that we have to look at the data as well. I have a couple questions. So with that new development that's going in north of Home Depot, is there, I know you said that there's going to be a new light that's going there. Is there going to be changes to the Rogers Grove, Boston Hover intersection as well? So when you're turning left going towards Home Depot with that additional traffic, is that also in the plan to change either the lighting or timing just north of Home Depot?
Yeah, so when we do install that new signal, we'll be retiming the signals. And it kind of coincides nice with our new traffic signal upgrade project on Hover Street, which will begin beginning of the year. So we'll be changing out that traffic signal system from basically Pike to 66 on Hover. So we'll be retiming everything with brand new detection and way more advanced features than what's currently available.
Super, great. With that serviceworks.longmontcolorado.gov, if we hear people coming to us with complaints, should we fill those out on their behalf, or should we direct them towards that? Like this afternoon, somebody was like, hey, what's going on with Pratt Parkway and 119? The new striping and signage is really confusing, and we don't know how to navigate it. Do we direct them to make complaints on that? What are some of the things that you want people to go to that serviceworks.longmont?
We would recommend that you steer them to ServiceWorks.
Perfect.
They can choose to make to put in a request anonymously. If they give us their name and contact information, they can elect to, hey, listen, I'd like a response for what the solution is. We've done that a number of times.
Perfect.
So what we always recommend that if residents got a complaint, sometimes it gets lost in translation. We recommend that they go directly to Service Works or to call. Now the call center is only open 8 to 5 Monday through Friday, but online is you can go in at any time.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you.
I'm curious if, and I know it's hard to do, but with the crash reports, are we looking at contributing factors and starting to chart that?
Yes, through Vision Zero, we're working on more of an interactive experience when it comes to our dashboards. And instead of an annualized report that shows just injuries, possible injuries, what we're trying to bring is something internally with staff where we can really see what causes these accidents through the police reports. So rear ends, broadside, side swipes, parked vehicles, single vehicle, multi-vehicle, as well as suspected as impairment on alcohol, marijuana, other illicit drugs. And then the intent with Vision Zero is to bring that information to a dashboard for residents to be able to click through and, get their information more readily available through there instead of asking staff. So you can really filter those out on a what you're interested in looking at basis.
And we are tracking then contributing factors such as excessive speed.
Yep. Yeah, we have speed, improper equipment, as well as violation data.
Right. And I'm imagining, because I know it'd probably be very difficult to do the inattentive driving factor is always, I know, fairly difficult to either prove unless somebody goes far enough to get cell phone records and that sort of a thing. Do we even track any of that if it's something that is either admitted to and or apparent?
There is, the data we're pulling is possible with our new reporting system that started in 2022. It's not always filled out, so it's kind of a wishy-washy metric. But a lot of the causes for the accident and then corresponding with the violation given, it's a little easier to kind of suspect out if distracted driving was part of that.
Is there any way that information, not just in a dashboard, I think that's very valuable, don't get me wrong, could be used at a point of contact with drivers in the effect of, even if it's public safety, saying you're excessive speeding, and last year in Longmont, at this intersection, we had 3 fatalities, and 3 of them were, speeding. I realize they don't have a Rolodex of that information. But the point is that if we provide some context to the offenders about the causes of accidents and the severity of these accidents in some of these intersections, possibly we could stop maybe one accident. That's what I'm thinking.
Yep, and I think that'd be part of what Cammie's team is doing, Vision Zero. Part of ours is engineering and enforcement, but a really large portion has to be education, not just education for putting out flyers or Facebook posts. It's for informing those drivers who are getting crashes, getting citations, and how to correspond with, just because it doesn't seem like a big issue to you, these are the issues we have on a macro scale of just because you're doing it, there's 1,000 other people doing it at this area too. And we need to start reducing that number down to get these crashes down.
Sure. I guess the other thing would be, if we're talking about engineering and design, that's pretty important to me. So have we looked at any of the segments and talked about things like road diets, adding trees, adding dedicated bike facility that's separated? Those things obviously will bring down speeds, and I know some of these segments can be fairly dangerous. Is that even a discussion point when it comes to some of these segments?
Thanks for asking that. That's a big component of the transportation mobility plan, and we'll be talking about that in probably around February of next year. So we're finalizing that plan, and a lot of that has to do with how you implement the road diets as part of a priority aspect when everybody's looking at the CIP, capital improvement program, for various projects. So how does that rank?
Can we overlay
how do we
the
use,
crash report?
Yeah, how do we use the crash report to
justify or
exactly.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. I think I'm good. Although I will note, Clover Basin at Airport you've got to add more green on that left-hand turn. I've seen so many near misses in that intersection. It's just waiting. And I know you say that people are either on their cell phone or they're inattentive and they're not getting through the light fast enough. I've counted it. It's not enough seconds for the people that are queuing up, especially during school from 3:30 to about 5 or 5:30. That left-hand turn is notoriously bad. And I see drivers kind of, gaming the system, if you will. I've actually seen a Rhode Island left, if you know what that is. Right? Yeah. So I'm just
Is that what it's called? A Rhode Island left?
That's what I've heard it.
What direction?
It'd be
At that intersection?
It would be the southbound airport to Clover Basin.
To Gulliver Basin to go east?
Yep.
Okay, and it's usually in the afternoon?
Definitely the queue, the
Okay.
storage. It goes past the the curve of it's pretty dangerous.
Yeah, that's one of the intersections we have a camera on, so
Yeah.
we can look at
Yeah.
and we can check it out tomorrow
Yeah.
and see. So we'll get some better data, but we'll look at it certainly.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Lehner, for bringing up kind of the design of roads. Because I think ultimately, when we approach Vision Zero, we should also be looking at what is our theoretical design speed of a roadway. So it's one thing to say, oh, the crash was caused by excessive speeding, but is the road too wide that promotes excessive speeding? Type of thing. So even though I want everyone to, slow down and pay attention and look at the actual speed limit, I think sometimes we have actual opportunities to slow people down via road diets, etc.
Ask if they could use the crash report as part of the design criteria.
There we go. Did you hear that? Use the crash report as part of the design criteria for roadways.
Yep, and we have several design projects in the works right now, mostly with some state agencies, and there is a shifting attitude, especially it's hard to get CDOT to agree some more, but starting to move now in the right direction where design speeds are starting to come down to actual driving speeds versus leaving that factor of safety. So when we're discussing these future projects, we're talking about making the design speed the speed that is posted versus designing a road for, let's say, 45 and then post it for 35 or for 40. So that's definitely a changing attitude in kind of transportation industry. And that's something that we're fighting for, of lowering speed limits, lowering that, kinetic energy when it comes to accidents, trying to reduce the serious injuries, as well as being able to navigate through intersections at lower speeds. We need to do tighter turn radiuses, faster cycles, so it gets traffic moving more efficiently, but also more consistently.
All right, and then kind of, I think I brought this up every year so far is kind of how do we use these numbers? Because I think of projects that we have talked about is like the 3rd Avenue improvement projects. We narrowed the lanes, we added a stop sign at Sherman and Francis. But I would like to note that on the crash report, 3rd and Francis had 2 crashes in the last 5 years. 3rd and Bowen had 17. And I did ask during that conversation is how come we're not doing improvements? So I'm just wondering how do we prioritize certain improvements, but then not others where maybe there's a higher number of crashes, maybe higher risk for people, but we're not doing anything there.
Yeah, so a lot of it is going to be changing areas. It's kind of like the Swiss cheese fix, where it's not going to be one fix that's going to fix the entire roadway system. So we make these improvements like road diets, lane shifts. It may direct traffic one way or another, or could also affect the cross traffic as well. So we're looking at 3rd Avenue is when this last section is getting paved, I believe, this week and next.
Yeah.
So finally get out of your guys' hair. We do have speed radars at several locations along that street that are actually collecting speed data throughout there. And then through our Vision Zero process, we're changing, or at least evaluating, our criteria and standards for stop signs, crosswalks, and other street furniture for appropriate locations. So through that task force, we can establish those standards and be able to provide an equitable approach to every area, every park, every school, just so it's on a very consistent basis and not because the loudest squeaky wheel is in one area versus the people who don't really speak up get neglected year after year after year.
Okay. And yeah, there's a lot of squeaky wheels over there. So, but it comes back to that question again: is why did we choose not Third and Bowen when there is higher crash reported there?
So that area, we did provide extra crossbars as well as adding better ramps, ADA ramps for they're directionalized now, as well as delineating the parking lanes and reducing the drive lanes through there. So that was done in 2023.
Last summer. Yeah.
So we're coming off a year, and the hardest part about that section is it's been continuous utility work, water work, gas work. So once this work is done, we can see how the roadway truly functions on a daily basis and be able to really evaluate what additional fixes are needed for that area.
All right.
So the work's not complete. The work's never not
Yeah.
done. We're continually evaluating it, and we're seeing those trends year after year.
Okay. And I'm not arguing against not having a stop sign at Francis. I'm just making the point that there is higher crash at Third and Bowen rating. So I'm just wondering, I'm still wondering why we didn't really do much actionable things there. But we'll find out when the whole project is done, and hopefully the data will come through. And then I think it was mentioned by another board member, Pratt Parkway, all the new striping. I've heard a lot of comments about that from members of the public getting confused. And I even, part of me, there's the forced right turn when you're heading south on Pratt Parkway into like the Safeway where the fire department is right there. There is a flashing sign. I see a lot of people not following this. There's a bit confusion. I'm wondering if we're just waiting for an accident to happen. I don't know if there's enough room like we did here out on 3rd Avenue of delineators to actually direct people to turn. But, it's a thought. Because I like what we did here, and I think it's an experiment that we could try elsewhere. Because again, it's a matter of physics instead of a flashing sign.
Yeah, so the changes to that intersection weren't necessarily new intersection changes. It was stemming from a project in, I believe it was 2018, it started. And that project brought extension of the center concrete median, as well as basically adding a bike lane on the west side to line up to the intersection. Before there was not a bike option. So that bike option was added, and in the plans it showed that lane dropping off. But in the final approved plans, there was never any signage or delineation of which lane goes where. That was kind of brought to my attention through a Times Call inquiry. And so what we did was we reflected that change that was intended in the plans to make that right turn a right turn only. And the through lane would go through the intersection. It's been an iterative process. We added signs. We added two, actually, flashing LED right turn lights to help get some compliance. There's been better compliance, but still not where we need it to be. We're talking with PD. That intersection does provide a lot of different groups needing to use that, as well as the fire department.
Yep.
And so we're currently evaluating it and trying to see if there's a better configuration that can satisfy all needs of transportation. But you're correct with the being too tight with the bike and then two large cars. It ends up squeezing that bike really more than I'd prefer. So we're looking at what's the best way to get all modes of travel through that intersection.
Okay. I think there's a lot of confusion from the public of what's going on. So, and I just hope we're not waiting for an accident to happen.
No.
So, that's all I have for now. So, thank you.
I've got a couple more. Concerning design, are you still using 85th percentile as part of the design process?
In setting Speed limits, or just evaluating
Speed limits?
just general speeds in the area.
Still?
We take it as a factor, as it's been at least standard, but it's not the only speeding criteria we actually take account for. So,
Okay. And then I'm curious on the driver feedback units. Is there any studies that show whether they're effective or not?
yes, so they're pretty good at informing drivers who are maybe just coasting, going about their day, long day at work or long day going to work. You're just blanking out and driving, and let you know, hey, you're going a little fast. Where you see a little less effectiveness is just the plain speeders who are going to speed. So there is a reduction in overall speed with those feedback signs, but they're not going to solve the high-end speeding problems.
Sure. And then I guess the last thing would be, would this crash data be effective in regards to looking at these segments that we have excessive speed and starting the conversation around speed cameras?
So there is a ordinance or resolution? Ordinance. Going to council tomorrow for the approval of speed and red light running cameras. So working with PD, with Chief Satter, and then Cami as well. So working all three together to possibly implement that technology in the city.
Great.
So that second reading is tomorrow evening.
Okay.
For the approval for kind of setting the legislative requirements for the city to move forward with both red light cameras and speed enforcement cameras.
Great. Has there been any sort of conversation within staff in what segments and or arterials would be identified?
We have an initial list, but we're still finalizing that with PD. So, but there will be advanced signage and notice of those areas that are going to be enforced.
Perfect. And public safety obviously is involved in the conversation, of course, because they're the ones who would have to.
Public safety's taken the lead on it.
Yeah.
So they've been collecting data as well. They've got a couple of the flashing radar units. So they've been building a database, sharing with us. We share our data with them, and they've been building that for some of their higher speed areas, as to look as to where we may want to start on instituting the use of the speed cameras. We're also looking at they are also looking at, well, we're all one big team, looking at portable radar units to do that as well, that can be moved around the city. Some will be fixed, some will be able to move, and then there's also red light cameras as well.
Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate that.
If approved by council, when would the first speed cameras or red light cameras go in place?
More than likely, it'll probably be in early next year. We're looking at is there an opportunity to fund some of those this year with certain dollars, but it is in the budget for next year. So more than likely, I think the red light cameras would be next year. Might get some trailers this year still. So we're working at that. The biggest thing was getting past the legislative components and getting the ordinance approved.
Is that excuse me? Is that some sort of a project or CIP that would be Safe Streets for All funded? Federal dollars that are available for that?
Not for speed enforcement. At least we're not pursuing it at this time. We'd have to look to see for the future whether there's funding available. The challenge with seeking some of those grants, an example you'll see is we said, hey, we got awarded a grant for $1.2 million. Those grants can take up to a year to develop a grant agreement. So if we waited for some of that funding, if it is available, we'd be probably by next year sometime looking at purchasing. But there is some other funding mechanisms that I think public safety is looking at to fund some of their items. So not necessarily Safe Streets for All, but there's other funding mechanisms that can support and leverage the city dollars.
No, I'm aware of that. I just figured if there was a way to obviously extend the funding out, that would give us even more, let's say, bang for our buck, if this was a program that we could, really leverage. That's why I was asking that.
real quick, I'll just add, since they are a proven safety countermeasure, they are fully fundable with federal dollars and other dollars. So between the feds, the states, and local dollars, we'll be able to leverage any or all of the above to support our pending,
Yeah, no,
probably
I-
accepted tomorrow night, that program. So looking at starting, obviously, with the dollars we
Absolutely.
have now. But yes, fully fundable.
Yep.
So originally we'd asked for your recommendations. We'll wait till December for that. We'll send this out to all the members and just make sure they have a chance to review it. And any comments, we'll put this on for December meeting. Thanks.
Okay, we'll move to any information items. Number 7? No? Okay. Comments from board members?
Well, sure. Less than an hour in. I think, I think the crash report's gotten better and easier to comprehend over the last 3 years now for me, or 3 sessions, I don't know. I commend the report. As I talked about, just add those titles at the top of the table so I remember what column I'm reading. But then I do have a kind of an interesting question because with some repaving projects happening around town and then restriping, an example on a road that I bike on all the time or drive on, west of Kaufman, 4th was just done, and repaved, striped just one block section. I just wonder what is the process of figuring out how much space we give to different modes. So I went out there and measured it. It was 13-foot lane. The bikes did get a buffered lane, but what could we have done with 3 more feet type of thing? And could we have also, I know the lane gets really tight once you get to the elementary school over there, if you continue west. So I'm just wondering, could we have some consistency, or are we just trying to update for present standards when we should be, I would say it's not a commercial road with heavy trucks that need wide turns. So I wonder what 13 feet means.
Yeah, so specifically the area in 4th Avenue is one we're looking at when we're doing like chip sealing or kind of that resurfacing. Try to update the striping, and the goal is to make it consistent through. The area you're talking about, I think it's over by Main Street to, I think, Kaufman, I believe.
Kaufman to Terry was just recently done.
Kaufman to
I know
Terry.
the Main Street section was also kind of done, but then it'll get a little bit torn up with Kaufman Street project.
Yeah. And that area has a little bit of irregular width when it comes to the existing parking stalls for the businesses, as well as the concrete islands that kind of pop out. So that area, it would either be an option of installing subpar bike lanes or installing the sharrows, which I believe are right there currently. But the goal is if we could fit, bike lanes or any delineated facilities, try to fit those in where we can, but avoid doing one block of segmented and all of a sudden get dumped off into shared use lanes, then back to normal, then back to that. So we're trying to create a consistent experience through, so drivers aren't surprised if a bicyclist has to merge with them or not.
Yeah. Well, I'm just curious of the 3 feet that kind of bugs me. As like we could have done a 10-foot lane and then had 3 feet of extra space for something else. We have it is shared a sharrow on the south side if you're going east along that section, but I'm just talking about one little block that's kind of annoying me. So so the south side of 4th, if you're going east, is a sharrow. The north side has a bike lane, but the north travel lane is a 13-foot wide lane. And again, I just say, what could we have done with 3 extra feet?
Yeah, I'll definitely revisit
Yeah.
it. But one thing we do try to consider when we're designing these bike lanes, and if they have delineated facilities, is the physical width of the biker. Instead of saying a 3-foot lane for bikes, when the bicyclist itself takes up
Right.
at least 2.5,
Right.
3 feet, and you're supposed to give another 3 feet for passing. I realize a lot of people don't do that. So when we're trying to get these bike lanes, we're trying to give bicyclists that built-in buffer space instead of just trying to crunch them in as much as we can just to say we put a bike lane in.
And I know it's just paint, but you know we have proven research to show that narrow lanes slow down traffic. So so again, that 3 extra feet, you
Yep.
know, I'm a little bugged. So that's all I got.
Well, I'll try to debug you a little bit. So one of the challenges I think we face is when we take on some of these smaller scale paving jobs, where we do like a block at a time. It can tend to be kind of difficult to provide consistent facilities along the whole corridor. Now on 4th Avenue, that was a project we had looked at last year. There is a striping plan. And Kyle and I would have to look at that and try to understand why we did put in 13-foot lanes, because that's something we would have probably said, yeah, not something we normally would do. If we have an opportunity to reduce some of the lanes, we wouldn't have made them 10, I'll tell you that. It's not a corridor that is conducive to a lot of speeding block to block. As you move further west, yes, we get some of those reports. But we'll take a look at it. We did have a striping plan created because there was a discussion about whether we, provide better bike facilities by eliminating parking. We have those discussions. We are currently this year starting, at least right about now, starting to look at next year's paving program to see what what is going to be our priorities? What are we going to have to restripe? The example I use is like last year on Fordham. That's when we decided, hey, let's make it, eliminate the center turn lane, provide additional facilities for bikes, 2 lanes each direction, or the road diet for 1 long block. We looked at 4th. I just have to look back at the plans to see what we had decided on. And, while we do our best in our field staff to make sure they comply with the plans, there are times when contractors screw up and may have put 13-foot lanes in, not 12-foot. More than likely, we would have called for 11 or 12, or they would have gone back to match the previous, which may have been why they were 13. So we'll take a look at it and see if we can get you some more information.
All right, I'll just, I'm a little concerned of not doing 10 because, research from NATCO and other organizations, and then as well as around the country, is starting to advocate for that 10, potentially even a little less. So I'm just wondering how ahead of the game are we going to be? And then also, if we really want to change that paradigm, we got to slow down the 2-ton machine.
While we're looking through Vision Zero, we are all talking about additional standards, but NACO is not one we've adopted.
Right.
So our staff in streets is not looking at that, which is why we have a committee that basically they bring a bunch of people together to look at what we can and can't do, and what we can do. But we'll bear that in mind as we move forward, and we'll look back to see what we may have been, what we can do better.
All right. Thank you.
Who dictates the width of the road? Is it us? Is it the fire department? How do we get to that 10-foot or less width? Where does that come from?
Basically, the city has a development standards, which we utilize for new projects, but we also draw from the AASHTO Green Book. For streets, we look at CDOT standards, so we can draw from a number of places. For roads, we want to look at some of your higher traveled roads with higher speeds are going to have wider roads or highways. But most of our city streets our local city streets are usually 10-foot lanes. Collectors may be a little bit wider. It depends on the use, what we're seeing. If we're seeing more trucks on the road, in maybe a commercial area, we may extend it to 12 feet wide. But we usually, as part of our plan now, we're always looking for collectors' arterials. How do we fit in better bike facilities?
And sorry for the naive question, but what is the width of a tractor trailer truck? Like,
probably about 9.5 to, depends what they're equipped with. So anywhere from like 9.5, 10 feet.
Gotcha. Okay.
They get mirrors and then also accounting for possible sway.
Got it. And then going back to that Pratt Parkway and 119, has there been a lot of complaints about that? Because I drive that Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 5 o'clock in the morning, and those signs are blinding, and they've annoyed me, and the striping also annoys me, and sometimes I'm in the lane and I have to kind of merge in to turn right onto 119. So I'm hearing other board members complain about it. Have we seen a lot of complaints about that intersection, and what are we going to do about
We
it?
have received comments about the intersection from various residents and business owners and PD as well.
Gotcha. Okay. And then for kind of changing gears a little bit, sidewalks on Long's Peak and the ramps on that. Have you all had a lot of complaints about that as well? Because there's new ramps on Long's Peak on the west side, kind of towards the golf course. There's new ramps that were put in, and there's some tripping hazards. And some residents have complained to City Council about those and haven't been addressed. So I don't know if you all have heard those complaints about the new ramps.
We've received, some of the residents have vocalized their concerns on those. We have responded and addressed them, I don't know that we physically changed anything out there. But the ramps were installed. They are in accordance with standards, and they are installed in accordance with American with the Disabilities Act. Changing ramps from what were traditionally kind of the ramps in the middle of the radius to directional ramps. Basically, when you have the ramps, and we have a lot of them in town that are on the radius, they tend to push people into the lane of traffic is the primary reason why we've made changes. I know that the staff who worked on that decided to depart and head over to the water utility group. So I'd have to revisit to see what we came up with. I think we were going to have the ADA. We've got an ADA on call now. Take a look at them and see if there's any issues. I'd have to revisit with our streets group on that.
Yeah, because if you walk them, they're not very consistent. There's a fire hydrant in the way, and then some of them are set back pretty far. It's just not consistent.
And part of the challenge is the road isn't consistent either. It's on a hill.
Sure.
That was a pretty challenging project when we took it on this year for resurfacing. So again, the staff meets on those. We talk about them. I'd have to look back to see where it landed.
Okay, great. Thanks. And that's all I had. Thank you.
I just had a couple comments and maybe some feedback, but it's great to see that we had a decrease in FSIs. I applaud that, the whole efforts by public safety, traffic, the whole group. I think that's great. Of course, still the number with VRUs, 71. I wish that were lower, of course. And Jim, you had mentioned, October and, why we're seeing the highest number in October and what's the reason behind that. And I get all that. Have we thought about doing a PSA on October on the website? Something that would push out this information to residents rather than having it on a dashboard. I think actually trying to reach them as much as we can to say, hey, October's coming up and it's the highest crash month, in the city of Longmont. So be aware there's kids out on the street or whatever.
I think as we start utilizing the data and seeing it, I think as Vision Zero starts to unfold, those programs will start to come to light. I think it's an excellent suggestion. I think there's some other areas we can look at as well to get education, get that out to the public.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're interfacing with public safety, the PD, which I think is great as well. Day of the week information. They're doing stops on Friday. They let somebody know, hey, this is the highest crash day. So slow it down. That sort of stuff. Any little thing we can do to reduce even one crash, I think, is helpful. And then I guess the last thing in regards to data is when I look at the comparison with other cities, and I know I've asked this before. I think I don't want to date myself. The last 2 times we've looked at a crash report, the last 3 times. Are we interfacing with cities like Arvada, Boulder, Fort Collins, Centennial, Castle Rock, and Greeley? And I just noticed that they're all cities about our size that have a much lower. Greeley, not as much. And I know that there's certain personalities to those cities. So Arvada and Boulder, we could argue that they have narrower streets, which they honestly do. And possibly that has the ability to lower speeds. And I noticed that some of the cities that have the higher crash rates have the wider streets. Hate to say that, but I think it's true with a town like Colorado Springs. So I'm just curious if there's any sort of discussions with these other cities to say, hey, is there anything, secret sauce special that you're doing? What are you doing with PD to collaborate? Because obviously Boulder, Castle Rock, and Arvada are doing something right because they're literally less than half the number, 3.1. So and since Boulder's a neighbor, I think, I'm sure you guys have conversations with them, and you may want to say something.
Yeah, we actually do meet with several cities, and CDOT has some regional kind of engineers get-togethers once or twice a year. We talk about projects we're doing, completed, and just general questions for community. So we get with a lot of neighboring cities, Loveland, Fort Collins, Superior, Lafayette, Louisville, as well as part of Dr. Cog. We talked to a lot of different cities through there, and they give updates on projects they're doing. One city that we talk to, or at least I talk to very often, is Littleton. They're doing a lot of the same technology and dealing with some of the same socioeconomic issues when it comes to transportation and highway deaths. So we're kind of collaborating ideas and seeing what updates we have from a year-to-year basis.
Yeah, Aaron's a good guy. I was just curious in regards to, crash data, crash reports, because I know that every municipality generally does it. Could there be a conversation with CDOT to say, why don't you do some sort of a crash data report kind of meeting seminar where we do have this collaboration and talk about these things? Because I don't think that's something that's on a regular kind of rhythm with CDOT, and I think it ought to be, especially with Vision Zero being adopted by so many municipalities. It would make a lot of sense. At least that's just my thinking. And I get it's hard sometimes, but I think it would be valuable information to share.
If you look up, they just released a new crash dashboard through Dr. Cog.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually a combination of CDOT data as well as a lot of different cities. I think we're the first North Dr. Cog city, but they actually did bring a bunch of crash data and options in a brand new dashboard that's accessible from either private or public. So I'd recommend checking that out through the Dr. Cog website.
Yeah, I think I've seen that, but I appreciate
we
all
hold meetings too about. I think those are either monthly or bi-monthly meetings for just crash data brainstorming.
Great. I appreciate all this information. I know it's a big lift for the entire staff to do this, so I do appreciate all that. So I guess with that, you have something else you want to add? Of course.
Sorry, I just wanted to add a fun little note. Just Googled, the width of a Ford F-150 with tow mirrors is 8.8 feet. With normal standard mirrors is 7.9. So, thank you.
Okay, let's move on to the items for the upcoming agenda. As noted, we will not be having a meeting November because it falls on Veterans Day, which is a city holiday, as it should. So we will be meeting December 8th, and it looks like we've got 21st and Main update, Vision Zero update, as well as the 2025 work plan. Phil, is there anything else you want to add?
We'll add the crash report just to kind of finalize that, and then you'll have your minutes from last month and this month. Thanks.
Okay, do I need to do a motion since we don't have a quorum, or we just kind of... Yeah. All right. We're adjourned.